Hello friends, and welcome to another Library Guide podcast. I'm Peter Ward. Today's guest is John Chraskta, Executive Director of Every Library. John will be talking to us about library advocacy and library funding. Okay, John, you're the Executive Director of Every Library. And there's been a downward trend in the number of library referenda that have passed. What is the purpose of Every Library in that environment?
Sure. Thanks for the time to be on too, Peter. I really appreciate it. We're set up as a political action committee, 501c4. We work on the funding for libraries almost exclusively, whether it's election day or a budget negotiation day, or a day that a city council or county government needs to decide, a day that a legislature needs to decide on their budget for libraries. What we work on is, in a certain respect, the medical model for library advocacy. We have a one patient at a time approach. Sometimes it's just in one zip code. We'll come in, we'll work on the particular situation that the library is facing, and like in a medical sort of way, we'll work on that one patient and help them get over the things that are ailing them, if you will, and maybe help take them all the way to success on election day. There's a public health analogy here that needs to be explored too. The systems that are in place, the policies that are in place. I mean, I'm interested personally in helping to cure that one patient at a time. And since we got started at the end of 2012, we've done 96 of these election days. But I'm also really interested, instead of just work on that one patient, in how do you cure cancer? I mean, how do you get the policies together that help people stop smoking? Well, in the library world, the equivalent of that isn't just one election day at a time, and that downward trend is certainly happening. But how do you turn around the public attitudes? How do you turn around the voter attitudes nationally? That's where we're trying to figure out how to do that best, as well as the work we're doing on these individual patients, libraries at a time.
Now, social media, social networking has become ubiquitous. Mm-hmm. Some people say that it's really replaced the public library. Some librarians say that it's a tool to be used by librarians. What do you say?
I think the reason that you're on social media is twofold. It's advertising, of course, but it's also marketing in order to build support. In the same way that you spend the time working on your vision, your mission, and your values statements for the library website, and the vision, mission, and values that you have that's in your strategic plan or in your building plan, you need to talk about your mission, because there's other people in the country who care about the mission that librarians have to, work on literacy services, early childhood, helping people find their first, next, or best job, making a more livable, interesting, viable community. There's folks who want to hear about that mission and want to support it, but they haven't heard about the mission. They sometimes just heard about the tasks. Then there's folks around the country who believe in the value system that they share your value system as a librarian. They also have a value system around literacy, around helping people with a hand up instead of a hand out. And there's people who appreciate hearing from you about your vision. Social media needs to be able to be used not only to advertise, come to story time on Saturday morning at 10 a.m., bring your kids, but it also has to talk about the values, the vision, the mission of having a professional staff who's trained in how to do early literacy services, and how we, as the librarians, are doing something that you want to see in the world, even if you don't have a kid yourself. That approach to social media, of talking about who you are, what you do, and starting sentences on social media with the word, we or I, we did this, I do that. That's a huge lift, I think, in terms of social media presence for libraries. It's not just putting advertisements up. I mean, otherwise it's just the same as like some sort of digital billboard. Some people drive by, they might glance at it.
Now, that's a very good point. Let me ask you about this. There are some librarians and some others who said that libraries are in a period of transition, that we both know, that they are suffering a sort of future shock, that the technological changes are difficult to keep up with. Does every library help libraries adjust so that they can be more adaptable to the community?
We're not in that business. There's a lot of other organizations that do that very well. We focus on other people focus on 364 days of the year, which is how to be a better librarian, how to do library work better, how to reach your user base better. We work on 1 day a year, Peter. We work on election day or budget day. And that 1 day a year is focused on, not on the user experience, but on talking about your vision, your mission, and your values. Now, the one place we do teach, and one place that's very generalizable to the other 364 days of the year, is on how to communicate more effectively with people about the work that you're doing. That skill you can take from an election day or a negotiation with your city council, your county government, your town board. You can take those skills and apply them to other sorts of work that you're doing in terms of communications and marketing and building support for the library 364 days of the year. But we're not doing the work of teaching librarians how to overcome their own fear of digital, unfortunately. That's something that's being done by other organizations out there.
Now, you're an expert in this area about trying to get the message out with regard to libraries. You've done it since 2012. Every library has. Let me ask you this. You've written 3 books. What are your general message to libraries?
The first thing that you need to do when you're considering taking a new request out for funding, whether it's to a voter individually or an elected official specifically, or even to donors, is to understand 2 things. One thing to understand is that you have to be able to talk with that first person singular or that first person plural pronoun. I said it before, you got to be able to say I or we, and you have to talk about, when you say I or we, you have to talk about your successes as an organization, as a group of people who care, people who are professional, who do this work. And you also have to talk about your failures. Like, where didn't you have the resources? Where didn't you have enough of us? Not enough positions to get it done. You have to talk about your successes and your failures before you start talking about your patrons. Because everybody talks about their patrons. In fact, nurses and doctors talk about their patients. But they also talk about what the work that they do as a doctor and as a nurse to be a healer, to help those families in those times of transition. And the other thing that you have to talk about, and the expertise that we try and bring, is that you have to be bold enough to talk about not just the fun stuff of what happens if you get the new funding, not just the plan A, but you also have to talk very clearly about plan B. Plan B is what happens if you don't get the funding. Plan B matters a great deal, not just to the believers who don't want to see plan B put into effect. They love plan A. The believers are all into plan A. But plan B needs to be talked about in this tax-averse climate that we're in. Otherwise, Peter, the only people that are going to respond are the believers. The folks who are questioning about where their tax money goes or suspicious about the way that politicians and bureaucrats spend their money, they need to hear from the librarians about the truth of, well, who's going to be left behind if this new funding doesn't go into effect. And they need to hear about it from the librarians with that first-person singular pronoun. I do this kind of work. We need those kinds of resources. Otherwise, those people that you and I both care about, they're going to be left behind.
Libraries in general, from your experience, do they have the public relations know-how to do this?
Some of them are great at it, and some of them are like sponges. They're willing to pick it up. The folks that we work best with are the ones who, like any adult. I mean, I say this myself to my team all the time. I say this whenever I go to a professional conference outside of library land to learn about my trade is, well, okay, I got some good instincts, I got some good competencies. How can I improve? There's a lot of good librarians out there. There's a lot of good library staffers who are out there, whether they got an MLS or not. They have not been taught over the years to do this the way I'm suggesting, the way we've proven.
Now, what is it exactly they haven't been taught? How to communicate their mission, how to reach the public, or what, John?
Well, it's that the fact that a lot of library advocacy training says that the best advocate is not the librarian themselves, him or herself, her or himself. It's somebody other than them. That's the second best. To have somebody represent you, of course, is nice. But when you are a candidate and you're running for office, the best thing you can do is knock on that door yourself and say, hey, I'm John. I'm running for mayor. I believe this about my hometown. Do you believe it too? Do you have a hope about our hometown? Oh, you do too? Great. Then vote for me and I'll take care of these policy issues. But together we can change this town for the better. Yes, the second best is to have somebody else come out and knock on your door and say, hey, I'm John. I'm with the Smith campaign for mayor. But that's the second best. The chance to be able to do it with a first-person singular, Peter, is the thing that's been missing. A lot of library advocacy training says get somebody else to stand up on your behalf and magically we'll take care of it. Nope. The only expert librarian in the community is the librarian. The only person who can speak authentically about what it's like to actually do this work is the librarian themselves. We use the metaphor of librarian as candidate, and it scares the hell out of people, but it's absolutely true. If you're going to look to change the world with the job you do every day, and you need some extra funding in order to bring in, some additional funding in order to bring in the right resources, or more people like yourself as more librarians, then you got to tell me as the taxpayer. Yeah, if somebody else endorses it, that's great. That just means more than just the library people want it. That's great. But I need to hear from you.